Hey, it's Julie. I've got a couple of minutes here. Trying to get my files up and ready for uh, working on some long, boring stuff today. No, I'm going to be. Where am I? Oh, there's what I wanted. Um, Basically, the main thing I'm going to be working on today is going to be some very repetitive stuff, so I'm going to talk about something else while I do it. But first, I have to get it uploaded to this computer. And this will be my first time actually working with real files for Fatal Girl. So, I mean, on this stream, not that I've never worked with them before. And so this will be a chance to show you some of the long, repetitive nature of things, but we'll let that upload for a bit. Um, for the moment, I'm going to thank everyone who's been watching this on YouTube and look forward to people watching this here on Twitch. I know it takes a while for things to catch on, especially something kind of esoteric like this that's not super visually stimulating, and but can be helpful in the long run for working on things. So, you know, we'll keep at it, see what happens over the course of a month or so, and see how much of my this, if nothing else, once I get started on Fatal Girl, this will be my chance to work on it while I talk to myself, which I do while I work anyway, and keep moving forward. It gives me a set time to sit down and work on this every day, and that works for me regardless. Um, right now, I am uploading all of my Fatal Girl files to this computer, which should go fast because this is my big, fast gaming computer with a giant backup drive. I when I had it put together, I'm as I've pointed out repeatedly, I'm not a technical person, but I can, despite not being technical, go to a bunch of different websites that all list um, technical specs for a decent gaming computer, write them all down, compare them all, so that I could go, okay, this is the motherboard, which one, go across and see which one gets mentioned the most, and then pick from all those and put them together, and then upgrade them whenever I could, whichever ones I could upgrade a little bit for a little bit of extra money I put together. And that way, I came up with all the components, ordered them all, and a friend put them together for me. Thank you, Peter. And he was like, "Do you realize you've got an 8 terabyte hard drive?" And I'm like, "Yes." He goes, "What are you going to do with 8 terabytes?" I'm like, "I will fill them up." Audio doesn't take as much as video. And that's one reason I've done so many audio blogs in the past. And I'm just now, moving into video a little bit. But it still does take up space. And I do want to at some point stream games too. I might actually do that on weekends or something. Do 3 or 4 hours of one game that I really, really want to play online. Just to, because. And then, working on all the different things, it just breaks up the monotony. But more than anything else, I don't want my computer. I didn't want this gaming computer to be obsolete the minute I plugged it in. And I knew that that could happen so easily because stuff moves forward so fast. So I really tried hard on that, and it seems to be working really well. Because one of the games that I would like to play is Dead by Daylight, but that's a group game, and I'm a little intimidated. The other one that I really want to play is Dead State, which is a zombie survival game. It's, a couple of years old, but I really, really liked it. It's well written, even though it's also, what'd you call it? Turn-based combat, which is something I can handle. I'm not a, I got out of video games years ago when it went past, button joystick. It was like, but I like stuff. I like strategy a lot and characters. Okay, so I've moved everything over. We're not going to Griff, we're going to Warehouse. Yes, Griff is named. It's a yellow, golden yellow backup drive, um, called from Red versus Blue. So here we go, season 2 episodes working. All right, episode 1. Now, yes, in theory, I've actually already split these up, but it was a really terrible idea. I've already made up boxes for all of these. That's not such a bad idea, but I've got. No. Where's all the voices? Oh, you stupid. I didn't copy everything I needed. I'm so clever. There we go. All voices. Durr. Episode 1. Now, this file was from. Hopefully, this is the right one. This file was from a group recording session we had with 3 of the main characters. We had Alice, Ken, and Hyde. I was directing, so I wasn't on mic. So it's a huge file, but it also still needs to be cleaned, which means that it's going to be a lot of repetitive stuff throughout. Now, what I'm going to do then, while I do it, is talk about something else while you can watch me repeatedly do the same thing over and over again. I want to talk about intellectual property. And I know that sounds like, what the hell has that got to do with anything? Well, it's got a lot to do with pretty much anything you want to do on the internet, whether it's visual arts or audio arts. Intellectual property, well, is the law that covers people's rights to their work, whether it's a photo or a piece of music or a book they've written. And it's hugely actually important to know at least a little bit. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I did work in an intellectual property law office for 20 years. So, don't quote me, but my information is, as far as I know, correct and should point you in the right direction if you need to know more. Because there's different kinds of intellectual property, and people forget about this. Okay? You've got the 3 main ones that you'd ever have to deal with are patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Patents are inventions. They are things that do things. Okay? That is very specifically what they are. That's not likely to come into play in most of the things I do, whether it's audio or whether it's pictures, simply because I'm not modifying somebody's invention. An invention would cover, say, the Audacity program, but that's open source, so that's unimportant. But I'm not modifying the program. I'm using the program, but that's not the same thing. Now, let me get this started before I go on a little bit more. I have already pulled out my noise removal exemplar here. I'm doing a 200 high pass rather than a 300. The higher the number goes, the more low notes are cut out. And the reason I'm doing 200 is because I've got Hyde and Ken on these tracks, and they're both male voices, and I want to keep more of their low notes in than I would normally do just for my voice. So the first thing I have to do, however, is, well, I can get my noise profile now. It doesn't matter when I get it. I've already set this one up. Now, I know it looks like, oh my gosh, so many tracks. Well, it is. Fatal Girl has like 30 to 40 scenes per episode because it is really long. This one has at least 41. That hopefully is the last one. And so the first thing that I have to do on all of these is high pass filter them. The first thing I am, however, going to do is I'm going to save the project as, because I always keep backups. And I'm going to make sure this comes over and goes into Warehouse 13, which is my huge 8 terabyte drive for whatever reason. And I'm going to make a voices folder. And then I'm going to say episode 1 HN, because this is going to be my high pass and noise removal file. It's going to go a little slow because it is a huge file. It's going to take a little time to save because it's also something I opened from the backup drive and am now saving to the hard drive, and that takes a little bit longer than when you're saving something to roughly the same place. Back to intellectual property for the moment. Oh, geez. At least my microphone is working. I just realized I didn't switch my speakers over. Playback devices. Headset. Oh boy. There's so many steps to take to get this turned on more or less each time. So I would have hopefully noticed that as soon as I started trying to play anything. But yeah, I hope I've got everything working. It shows me the mic is working, so that's good. Even if I haven't been able to hear anything. Now, intellectual property, like I said, you're seldom going to have to deal with patents unless you're inventing or modifying an actual invention. That's why those are kind of out of the way. Now, trademarks are specifically a name or a picture or a combination of a name and a picture that indicates the source of an item. A trademark would be McDonald's. McDonald's and the golden arches indicate that whatever is in a McDonald's bag came from McDonald's. Okay, before I continue, let me start my high pass filter. I'm turning this to 200. That's the lowest, I leave it there. And then I'm just going to say okay. Now a lot of these are very short, so they're going to run fast. They won't even necessarily have the box pop up on the screen as they run. And I'm just using my repeat key, which I set as Q in my customization video 2 days ago, 1 day ago. And so it's like I said, it's just sort of long and tedious in some ways. Wait a minute, why is that not highlighting the whole track? We must have added part of it on. You always have to watch out for when you add on to a track, when you continue recording after stopping, that you don't accidentally leave off some part of it. Let's look at that here. Now, if I get in close to that, you'll see there's this big line. Now, if I click on the line, it'll go away and merge the track automatically. But if I hadn't noticed that it didn't highlight the whole thing, it might just have processed this part and not the part after the bar. Or if I was at the end of it and clicked on it, it would have only taken the little bit at the end rather than processing the whole thing. So that's a hazard you got to watch out for. Did I do the next track already? Oh, poop. Okay, it looks like I did. That's why undo is your friend. And this is one thing, if you're not sure whether you did it, you can sometimes go back to edit and it'll show you undo high pass filter. That'll be whatever the last thing you did was. So I'm hoping it's episode number 12 there. So actually, you know what? I'm going to undo one more and then I've got the high pass filter there. Okay. I hate it when I get lost. So, that probably worked. So I'm going to do the high pass filter here. High pass filter will start again just so I'm not confused, theoretically. And it's very easy to do a lot of this on autopilot, but it's also easy to occasionally screw up, and that's why I always save backup copies. That's why I always make massive backups so that if I screw it up and can't fix it, I can always take a step back to a previous file and move forward again as needed. Anyway, so trademarks, that is a mark that shows you where something came from, a name that is famous. Now, it's all very easy to say, oh, well, I'm going to name my thing McDonald's. It's not the same as McDonald's. They're not going to come after me. But when you do use somebody's trademark, then if it's in the same field they're in, and something like McDonald's is, or like Coke or something, are big enough that they're usually cover a lot of fields. Coke isn't just for sodas, it's also for, t-shirts and whatever else they've put the word Coke on. They've got a trademark for it. And that way, they're protecting their mark, they're protecting their famousness. And the point is so that nobody else can trade on that. Nobody can say, "Oh, McDonald's," and then people will be like, "Oh, McDonald's, really?" And buy your stuff thinking it's coming from another source. And they have to protect that. They have to. It's not a choice. So they're going to protect their mark no matter what, because they could lose it if they don't. Because among other things, their mark is a guarantee of quality. Now, I've done the high pass filter all the way down, and now I'm going to do the noise removal. And I've already got the noise profile, so I'm just going to go down here and hit OK. After the first time, I'm just going to use the repeat key. And here we're going again. So, if you have a trademark, you have to defend it. You have to tell people not to use it. You have to, protect it. And the trademark can be something like Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is a trademarked character. They have to protect it. And because it's a valuable thing that they've invested. It's still 2 pieces because I undid that. How clever of me. They have to protect it. They have to, because they've put money into it. And if they allow the mark to be diluted, to be, for other people to use it, then they lose the value. So now, that doesn't mean you can't, like, in a book you write, mention Coca-Cola or something. I mean, because really, they don't care about that, because you're not naming the book Coca-Cola. You're not trading on the name to sell the product. That's what a trademark is for. Trademark meaning trade, meaning sales and things. So, it's fine to mention, brand name things in a book in passing. I mean, you wouldn't want to malign them necessarily in a book. If you're going to make a corporation a villain, make it a fictional one. But there's nothing wrong with saying the names of products, the trademarked names, as long as you're not trying to sell the book based on it having a trademark in the title or something. Now, you can't trademark a book's name unless it's super, super famous. I mean, things like Harry Potter, that is trademarked. Harry Potter is trademarked because it's a series and a whole bunch of other stuff. But they've probably trademarked the names of all the books. But you get something like, Love's Gentle Captive for a romance novel. That's not even specific, let alone trademarkable. You could have 20 books with the same name totally by accident because it was put together from a Scrabble bag. Romances are like that. And that's part of what makes them so annoying sometimes, and why people create series titles that help to define it. It's like, sexy romance or sexy pirate romance books presents such and such or something, so that they know it's theirs and not anybody else's. Crap, I lost my place again. Okay, I did do that one. I will redo it. Redo. Anyway, so, theoretically, doing the noise removal twice shouldn't do any harm because it won't take out more stuff. It's not like it's going to go looking for more to take out. But I still try to process everything exactly the same way, just so that the sound is consistent. Back to trademarks. If you do want to seek a trademark for something, whether it's a game or a book or a audio series or something, your best there are 3 different kinds of trademarks. You've got marks things that are not trademarkable are things that are generic or too specific, or actually describe something. In other words, if you were selling Red Dogs, you wouldn't want to call it Red Dogs Emporium, because that tells you exactly what's in it. I know that sounds weird, But the problem is, if somebody else wants to sell Red Dogs, if you have it trademarked, they can't actually use the name of their product, the description of the product. If you were selling beer called Red Dog, that's different because everybody can still use the word beer to describe their product because you're just calling it Red Dog beer or something. You can't, you cannot trademark the word that is the name of your product particularly. You can trademark other parts of it. If you trademark Red Dog beer, you'd be like Red Dog would be trademarked and beer would not. Because you can't stop competitors from using a word that describes the product. Um, Books words that allude to something are usually are better than words that actually describe it. If I was going to say sell beer and I decided to call it uh, uh, makes you burp beer, that would be unusual. It probably wouldn't be very saleable, but it would just kind of describe the product, but in an elusive way, illusionish, al, al, alluding, alluded, no, no. Anyway, it'd be something that wouldn't be specific. It wouldn't prevent others from using words to describe the product specifically with its noun. It's more like adjectives. And then if you went to like Red Dog beer, that totally Red Dog has nothing to do with beer, so it's a fanciful mark. It's a mark that means nothing in comparison to the product, but at the same time, you can make it famous so that it uh, will eventually gain fame. Um, there's all sorts of examples everywhere for all of this stuff, but it's like Mountain Dew for soda. Okay, well, dew implies liquid, and Mountain Dew implies fresh and cold and things like that, but it really has nothing to do with the actual product. So, there's so many different things out there. Anyway, trademarks aside, I mean, like, if you look at my shows, 19 Nocturne Boulevard, I could trademark it. Trademarks are expensive. I have a common law trademark, essentially, because I've been using the name so long. And also, Reality Productions, my production company, I've been using that name for like 20 years from my zine to my clothing line. I mean, that's my company. And I have a history of it that I can prove. So even with if you have a common law trademark, you can't prevent others from using the same mark, but they can't stop you from using it either. You can only prevent others if you get it registered with and trademarks are like $8,000, $10,000. They're not cheap. It's not cheap to put through a trademark, even a completely fanciful one. It's worth it if you're a corporation, but as an individual person, most of the time it's not worth it. Um, Unless you're, going to be selling a lot of stuff. So then the thing that we're most concerned with in audio drama circles is, of course, copyright. Now, I've finished all of the boring part, the H and N. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll break out each piece as I go along. Now, this is scene 2. These are all by scene number. We recorded each one going down the page, basically, so that they were all kept together. And I'll put each one into their own category. Remember, I use semicolon for paste because I wanted a one-click paste button. Now, I'm going to save this. Before I do anything, I never work in a file that I have... Well, I should never work in a file that I've never saved. It happens to everyone. But it's always best to save. Audacity has not had massive problems in a long time. But that doesn't mean that anyone who's used it before isn't going to have a story about a problem with it. So, I'm going to call this Scene 2 HN, just so that I know that this is the cleaned up version. And everybody has worked with, I mean, everybody's had in any program, you know, you're in that crunch time and you forget to save, and you've just put 5,000 more words into your book, and suddenly the word crashes, or whatever program you're in crashes. Saving often is always a good idea. And, as you know, and Audacity has crashed, and I have lost things. And it's sad. But that's one reason that I've learned to save as the way I do. I'm pretty compulsive about it. I was just as compulsive in Word. Now, looking at this, you can see that when we recorded with a group, we had two microphones. And because I have a mixer on the way into the computer, it's a Tascam interface that allows the two microphones to come in separately. What we have here, as you can see, is one person standing on the left mic and nobody at the right mic. And the right mic still picks up a little bit of the voice from the left mic, but it doesn't really carry much of it. And let's see who this is.
Hi, from New York. Yeah.
That would be right. So, Ken. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split stereo to mono. Because what that does is it makes each track its own track. Right now, that top track is my left track, and I can only hear it in the left headphone. The bottom track, the right track, you can only hear in the right headphone. They're completely separate. It'll sound a little bit stereo because some little part of it here is coming in on the right headphone as well as the left, but really it's not. They're very separate. That's why I'm going to break it into two mono tracks. Each mono track will be dead center. And in fact, at that point, I'm going to delete that mono track because there was nothing in there that I needed. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to undo. It doesn't look like there is anything that isn't a reflection except maybe here. You're calling for them to answer the door. You're not wondering who's at the door.
Oh, okay. Huh?
You know, as a lot of times that's just my direction or somebody else in the room kibitzing. Now, if you've listened to Fatal Girl at all, you might notice that there are a lot of bloopers at the end of all of the episodes that exist. And we get the most hilarious bloopers when we're in a group because we tend to bait each other a lot. That's one reason it's so much fun to record when you can actually have people in the room together. In this case, I just do a quick check to see if there's anything.
Issue with their presence again.
Anything interesting in here?
Oh, and again. Okay. So.
Nope, this one was pretty bland. I'll generally check places that are, don't show up big enough because somebody was across the room or whatever. That's why some of the bloopers end up sounding a little tinny, is because whoever said it was way off mic, and that was just the way it was. And I'm not concerned with that with bloopers. You don't want to stage them so they sound wonderful, because then they're just staged. So this is the lines for scene 1, and this is actually 2 full takes of the same thing. Here, we'll play it.
And make a little transfer here.
Hopefully you can hear this.
I know we'll take a loss, but we need the ready cash. Huh?
It shows that it's going into the mixer.
Alice?
You're calling for them to answer the door. You're not wondering who's
at the door. Oh, okay. Huh? Gee? Alice? Well, somebody better get it, because I'm busy. Huh.
We also get a lot of gaps in these when I hear a car going by or something, and I'll signal for somebody to stop. I mean, this part of that is him snapping. Like I mentioned, I have a clicker.
Transfer here. I know we'll take a loss, but we need the ready cash to. Huh? Gee, Alice? Somebody better get that, because I'm busy.
So, there's the first part of a scene. That's the core voice. This is him being silly.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Because we were being silly. And that one, just because I do this, I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to start saving up bloopers. Not all of them are going to make the final cut. It'll be whatever is funny. when I get to that point. But I'll put it up in voices probably. Actually, well, yeah, episode 1 bloopers is good enough. And I'll keep that file open whenever I'm editing on episode 1 so that anything I find that's funny can go in there. Now, one of the things that I will generally default to is I'll use the second take. We always do at least 2 takes, even when live, just so that we've got, for sure, got the take. If the first one, when it was recorded, there was like a car or somebody farted or whatever, then it might not be usable, or the second one might not be usable, but there's very little time that both of them would ever turn out to be unusable. So, for the most part, I'm always going to default to using the second one, because the first one we'll get the direction in, it's the backup. The second one is more like this is the dress rehearsal, the first part, and the second one is like the final. So, now that's all I need to do with scene 2, so I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go down to scene 3 and take it, or scene 4. Scene 3 and scene 1 must involve other characters, not the main characters. And that's not unusual because usually the opening sequence before the opening credits is more likely to involve a villain character or some sort of setup for the story. In episode 1 of season 2 of Fatal Girl, the opening actually involves Ken and Chi as children when they first met at a wedding. And now I'm looking at this track again. Again, it looks like there's nothing in this bottom track that isn't in the top track. So I don't have to keep it. I'm going to split it to mono. Now you can also split it to stereo, which means one track will still be completely left and one will be completely right. See, they didn't used to have split stereo to mono when I started doing this, and you would have to split it like that and then change them both to mono. So this is nice that I can just split stereo to mono and get rid of it. I could also merge it so that this sound comes over there, but really it's unnecessary. When they're on mic, directly on mic, on the left or the right, you don't need the extra sound from the other mic. In fact, it might be a little bit distorted that way, so it's better to work straight from a mic whenever possible. So again, I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm just going to save. Oh, I didn't save it first. I'm so bad. Save as, and this will be in it. Oh no. See, I keep everything very separated because then I can find it. And a lot of times that's really my main goal, is to be able to find it reliably when I need it. Now I'm going to keep doing this with these as I go along, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about copyright as long as I don't get too confused. So, copyright is the protection for artistic works. That's why it is so important for anything being done involving visual, involving music, involving stories, books. Anyone who follows my channel knows I do a lot of Atomic Julie's Galactic Bedtime Stories, which is old sci-fi stories that are in the public domain at this point. Now, public domain, I trust Project Gutenberg, and they're the ones who do the research on those and put out the stories that they determine are public domain, that have failed to renew copyright or have passed out of copyright. But what copyright, frankly, is an unending labyrinth of poo. It really is. It is a super convoluted, awful area of law. Why does it keep coming back? Oh, I know, I was right. Scene 6. Pardon my snorking, it's still winter, and probably will be for a while. So, the other thing I should be doing is...
Whatever you do...
is naming these, because this is Ken. And I'll open up those other two. So, because this is probably Ken, too.
Well, what's she doing?
But yeah, I mean, just because copyright is a super convoluted area of law, there are so many bizarre rules for it. But there are only a couple of hard and fast rules that you can trust, and that's one reason it's not something to muck about with. The big thing with copyright is, I mean, the one rule that is more or less hard and fast is that anything published in the US prior to 1923 is in public domain. That's about the only thing you can trust. So what that means is that and before I go on, we're gonna I'll with the copyright, with being able to trust things, the idea is that at the time those things were published, it was 70 years from the death of the copyright holder. So those have passed into public domain. And I mean, then there's a second rule that says that anything that was published basically from then until like 1974, when I think sometime in the 70s when the law was changed, those things would have passed into public domain if the copyright was not renewed or if they were published without a copyright notice. That's why Night of the Living Dead is in public domain, even though, I mean, it went into public domain almost immediately when it came out, because when the first copies were printed of the screen of the actual film were printed, some dumbass editor cut out the copyright notice, and I mean that became this landmark case for copyright, which is why the law got changed. Was the fact that, you know, in something like that, it's hardly the fault of everyone who worked on it, that, you know, particularly the director or something, that some jackass cut the copyright off and had it go out published, quote unquote, without a copyright notice. Okay, we're on scene 8, but you can see now I've got voices in both tracks. This is when we had two people on mic, probably Ken.
Look, is
there's
there
Ken
anything?
and Alice.
I'm eating now, and it will be food or your face.
I sure hope the sound is coming across, because I am such a funny writer. Now, so we'll put Ken and we'll put Alice. Now, some of these scenes may also have Chiyoko in them, but I recorded myself separately, and that is another track to be added in. I know that people are like, well, why are we seeing all this repetitive stuff? Well, part of the point of this whole process is to let people understand better how much work goes into this, because there is a lot of work for any show, and a lot of it is tedious, repetitive stuff. And, you know, I'm trying to keep it interesting by talking about other stuff while I do this. You know, I'll probably review a movie or something at some point while I'm doing boring stuff. But the idea is, there is a lot that goes into the whole process of making audio dramas. A lot more than you would necessarily expect, because, you know, it seems so easy. And it can be easy sometimes if you're doing something live where you have all your live sound effects and people on mic, and all you're doing is recording a live thing. But then you've got rehearsals, and then you've got having to create practical sound effects and things like that, which is actually adds to the time in a completely different way. Okay, so I'm going to leave this as is. I'm not going to review every track right now, because that would be even more time. I will listen to them on my own and pull out more of the blooper concepts as I go along. I will also probably identify just where the second half of it is and work on that. Like I said, the second take. Oh my gosh! Joe's Speakeasy asked me a question. Hello! I have somebody here. Yes, I am using Audacity. That's it's a simple program and free, and well, I shouldn't say simple. It's basic program and free, and I've used it for years. Yay! A question. Thank you. I like Audacity because I'm used to it and it's something I've used for a long time. I know a lot of other people are very big on different programs, but this is not a bad one to start with, and I can do what I want to do in here and create really good sound, so I don't see the reason to necessarily upgrade. Plus, there's the learning curve on a new program and stuff, and I've tried a couple of different ones like Goldwave and what was the other one? Uh, I had a sample copy of the one that comes with Adobe at one point. That's not Goldwave, is it? No. And I should know what it is. But anyway, and I just didn't like them as much. I mean, because I don't use all the bells and whistles, I don't need all the bells and whistles. I hope that makes sense. So, ooh, I'm watching on my little phone screen. I thought it looked familiar. Oh, cool. That's awesome. I hope you'll get something out of this. This isn't the most exciting visually episode because I'm doing a lot of repetitive stuff, but I'm talking, as I said, about copyright and other things that are really relative to the whole process of creating stuff on the internet. Oops, I'm not in scene 6. I'm in scene 8 now. And so, well, thank you for joining me. I am happy to answer any questions I can. This is oh well, cool. You use Audacity too? Awesome. Well, I mean, if it does what you need, why do you need more, right? And I have, through trial and error, figured out a lot of things on here, and asked for help a few times, and the Audacity forums are great for that. So, how much, customer support do you get on some of the more expensive programs? Oops, paste. Every once in a while I default back to Control V, even though I set my paste to be something else, because I prefer it that way. Now this one, it's hard to tell if this is actually a secondary voice or if it's just very loud on this side. So...
I love Chuck E. Cheese's!
I also love Chuck E. Cheese's.
Okay, that's definitely a blooper that's going in. Hey, Joe's Speakeasy, can you hear the things when I play them? I'll wait for an answer on that. But that was definitely going into the blooper reel, because how many times do you get to talk about Chuck E. Cheese's? Wait, I am so silly today. There we go. So, and this is, that was a joke. Let's see. Well, I think I'm going to keep both sides of this, even though I'm going to go ahead and split it, because this side down here is...
Really bad day.
hide. Oh, good. That looks like a yes. I just know we had problems. Didn't have it set up right the first episode, so it's good to know it's working now, especially when it's funny. Of course, the volume may be a little erratic because when I open those, they're a little different, but as I try and talk while I work, but cool. Here, I'll play that clip for you because it is pretty funny. It's...
Huh? I forgot to eat anything today. What would you like? We can go anywhere.
You choose. I would pick some place noisy and silly with too many people. You will know a place that isn't Chuck E. Cheese's.
I love Chuck E. Cheese's!
The Chuck E. Cheese line isn't in the script. That was just me being silly.
Well, we can't both like Chuck E. Cheese's. Now we have to fight to the death.
In the ball pit.
Yes! The ball pit is for serious
I'll be over
business.
here wailing on the whack-a-mole.
You don't want to know what I've done to the whack-a-mole. They whack back.
I cut their heads off.
this is why it's so much fun to have everybody in to record at once, because we can play off each other and go a little bit crazy sometimes. It also slows down the process a little bit, but that's okay because that's where we get the good bloopers. Anyway, um, let's see. Back to copyright. I know. Um, it's all very well. We all have this tendency, especially on the internet these days, to assume that everything is free and clear. We could just use it. It's like, no, somebody put work into that. It's just like when people are like, oh, look, I found a place where I could get all my audiobooks for free. It's like, you are stealing then. Because, it's all very well for us to all go, oh, well, Metallica, they were so pissy when they took out Napster. I know there's probably people out here who don't even remember that. But everybody was like, oh, well, Metallica, they got lots of money. It's like, well, yeah, but most books, especially from indie authors, they make pennies every sale, and they need all those pennies. And people just don't respect people's work, and it's kind of frustrating. I mean, because I dictate audiobooks, obviously, it means something to me when books that I've put 20 hours and $500 in editing into get just traded in pirate places.
And handling, and by then I might as well keep the...
Okay, there's Ken, and then down here
Hard.
is
No!
What bug crawled up your butt?
Alice. So, it's unfortunate that everybody thinks that everything is sort of just there to use. I mean, and it's one thing if you're doing something where it's a meme and it's a picture and you just put a funny caption on it and it's nothing. I mean, that's different. But if you're using it in some work that you're working on, and music is one of the areas that I'm very, very anal about, for this, is, it's somebody else's work, and also for stories and things. I adapted from a lot of stuff that's public domain, but I don't directly adapt from things that aren't, without permission, or without some kind of agreement by the author to make sure it's okay. So it's when you hear shows and or some show or whatever, and they put in something that's from a popular artist, like a clip from some famous song at the moment, that's still not okay. And also, that gives, especially on YouTube and stuff, that gives that artist a chance to come in and ding you for what you... Oh, shoot, I forgot what scene this was. It was scene 12. Come in and ding you for using their stuff, which, why do it if you can just... Why do it whenever you can use something legitimately? There's a lot of music out there for Creative Commons usage, which generally involves not, a promise not to make money off it, which I suspect, ad revenue is sort of a gray area, which I haven't really looked into, but in general, if you're not selling it, I think it's okay. And one of the things I'm edging around to talk about, of course, is fanfic. And, I have always strenuously avoided... Oops. Oh, yeah. Yes, it would get pretty expensive if you had to pay a royalty to the guy who built a chair every time you sit down. Yeah, but that's different. It's but you're not charging for people to sit there or something. I mean, you buy it. But see, when you buy music, you're buying music for personal use. That's what they're selling. Unless they're selling something that is for other use. They're assuming you're going to listen to it, or you might play it for a friend, but not that you're going to resell it, or that you're going to post it for sale or use it in something commercially. And that's really where the difference comes in, is that there's a different expectation. What is being sold is what is being sold. And it's that's it's a problem, especially in the digital age, because I mean, back in the day, you bought a book, and then if you got tired of it, you sold it to half price, or a used bookstore, or you gave it away and it got sold by Goodwill or whatever. And but that's different than a digital copy, because a digital copy you could give away 10,000 copies instead of the one that you purchased. And and again, it's the problem is it hits the artist. And the at the core of everything is that, especially with writers and musicians and stuff who are in the indie kind of categories, they if you like their work enough to read it and want to distribute it, you should be paying them, because they will stop. If they can't make a living doing it, they will have to stop. And if you like their work, you should be encouraging them to do more. And most books and things aren't that expensive. If somebody bootlegs 500 books, they saved $5 a book or something. That's one thing, but that's, to them, that's one thing. But then 10,000 people download it, and that's 10,000 $5. Well, once Amazon gets its cut, it's like $2. $2 that would have gone to the author, that might have
I prefer to think about more pleasant things.
pays their rent or whatever. I mean, it's really a difficult thing, and that's one reason, rather than trying to charge per episode, because that's outside what I'm willing to do.
Tiny little morsels on the plate.
I haven't
most
touched
of the
mine.
meal.
Oh.
That yeah, I'm gonna leave that there, because there are some interplay there that I'll listen to later. Because I know where I was. Oh, darn it, I lost my place completely while I was listening to that. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, if you like something, you should pay for it. Oh, that's what it is. That's why I have a Patreon rather than charging per episode, is because, I mean, that's supporting me, the artist, to create things rather than having to pay for things. And they get stuff first because of it. They get early access to anything I do. All the people who have come in to support me through the Patreon. But I'm not making it a charge for product. It's sort of a sideways way to justify it, but unfortunately, being self-employed, I have to use my time for the audiobooks, which are my job, as much as I can, rather than do things that are fun like this. I know this part's not that fun, but do shows that are going to be more generally entertaining and free for people. So the Patreon helps me do a little bit of that, at least. Oh, let's see who this is.
No, I can't. I mean, it's like retreat from it. You were
No, not
backing away
Ken.
from it. No, retreat from it. When you get down to Ken would teach me. No!
Some of the times it's just directorial stuff, because in this group, I have to say, when I have Beverly who plays Alice, Ray who plays Ken, and Mike who plays Hyde, and me, all in a room, Beverly teaches drama. Ray has done a lot of drama, and Mike is very dramatic. And I'm the director, but we all are constantly giving each other directorial cues, and
Till the
making
train
suggestions. Okay, so this is an Alice scene. So we do tend to break off a lot and do a lot of directorial stuff. That's one of the nice things, actually, about having everyone in a room, is that if I'm there, I mean, if I have everybody with me in a room, I can tell them how I want it to sound. Oh, I already saved. No, this is the new one, 16. I can direct them and make sure that I get what I want. It's not as hit or miss as you do with some satellite recording. Now, good people who are recording on their own will take that into consideration and be able to give you a lot of variations to use. But there are times when things just don't come out right, no matter what you do. But anyway, I know I'm on my high horse about copyright infringement and stuff, but also, I mean, anytime you use somebody else's work, that's opening a door, pardon me, excuse me, opening a door to have your work rendered useless. In other words, for instance, many years ago, well, 5 years ago or so, one group of audio drama artists decided to do an adaptation of a Conan novel, which was public domain. The problem is that Conan is still a trademarked character, and they got a cease and desist letter, and all the work they'd put into it went to waste because
Touché.
they had to pull it
I
down.
merely meant that the women in the circles I usually move.
So it's too much opening yourself up to having your work destroyed or forced to take down or whatever. I mean, because you have no rights to use something, they can come in and take away what you've done. And that's really, I mean, a lot of people on YouTube are experiencing this right now, a lot of the gamers, because they're getting dinged for copyright infringement for music and stuff that comes up. There's a lot of times when the people who play games on there, when they hear something that they know is copyrighted, they'll either talk over it or they'll mute it, because otherwise that track, that little fraction of the time of their whole video could get dinged and lose them their income for that video, for all the work they put in. And and I mean, they can't avoid it because they're playing the games, and they're doing the games are okay except for Nintendo stuff, but the apparently, but I mean, they've got permission to, or at least some kind of permission to stream or video the games they play, but independent components of it, like the music, can still get them in hot water, and that's very awkward. That's why I'm just very careful about what I use. Now, if you listen to something like Edict Zero and you hear stuff, and you hear in the credits when Jack goes, "This is music by Nine Inch Nails," it's like, oh my god, he uses that. He goes and gets permission. He actually talks to these bands and stuff, and he gets permission. He is doing that all completely legit. I wouldn't be able to find a way to talk to a band and ask for permission. But, I mean, well, I have actually a couple times for the smaller stuff that I've used. I mean, from smaller bands, not big famous bands. I mean, I think of Nine Inch Nails as being famous because I've heard of them. But that's the thing, is that, some people do actually manage to get permission to use certain things. I got permission from Darkest of the Hillside Thickets to use some of their music in one of my episodes in Exit Strategy. And that's mainly because I know the dudes and we've gamed at conventions and stuff. But they, and it was also because it was just using a small clip of it. And that using a small clip of something is sometimes considered
No, wait a moment. He cut it in half. No, it's about fruit because it's a watermelon. No, he reaches into the
I have no idea what he's talking about. That's not in the script.
I despise them all, and
Okay. So this is actually a Hyde track with Ray babbling at some point for some reason. I'll listen to that later. But the idea, the thing is that, and permission is permission, but fair use is very, very small. Very, very, very small. If somebody decides they're going to do something under fair use, it should be something like a quote. Oh, and I'll get to that in just a second. Something like a quote where you're saying, oh, so and so said this or so and so said that, as opposed to quoting an entire song lyric or something like a verses and verses of a song lyric. Yes, let's see. Joe's Speakeasy has dropped me a note here. It says, I sing with a barbershop harmony group. Oh, those are cool. You get that extra note. We used to meet at a local restaurant for Harmony for Lunch Bunch. Basically, we were meeting for lunch and singing because it's our hobby. ASCAP sent the restaurant owner a bill for $8,000 to cover royalties for the songs of which we were singing, most of which were written in the Roaring Twenties. Yeah. See, that's unfortunate. But it happens. And see, the problem is, regardless of whether you're in the right or not, and this is part of what makes this such a pain in the ass, the people with the money are likely to win. You know, I mean, it sucks, but, you know, I mean, are you going to sit there and defend it? And so, and that really sucks because, like you said, it was written in the 20s, but only stuff prior to 1923 is 100% out of copyright. So there's still a lot of stuff from the 20s that is technically covered by ASCAP. And that sucks. You know, and that's one reason I talk about stuff like this is because I'd rather have people cautious and informed before they do it than have to deal with something like that turning up later on because they assumed it was okay. You know, and it's unfortunate, especially when it's something that should be okay. Um, you know, and yeah, I mean, and it's rough. Also, you know, there are some, you know, gray areas and stuff, but the ultimate come down on everything is if you get dinged, it's bad. It's not going to be, you know, it's a lot of times it's going to be something um it's going to be more than just a cease and desist. They're going to want, you know, some sort of royalties or whatever. And even with something like that, where you weren't making money at it and they weren't making money at it, the way ASCAP would view it is it was an enticement to get people into the restaurant. And that's unfortunate. So, you know, and unfortunately, again, they have to do something. Well, in theory at least, you have to protect your intellectual property. You have to at least get people to stop using it. But big corporations are mostly motivated by money, and they would rather just charge everybody. They don't give a crap. Oh, yeah, and arrangements. Yeah, I was actually going to talk about music. You mentioned new arrangements of old songs. Well, see, yeah, what happens is music is one of the worst, but worst, I wouldn't say worst, but most awkward areas of copyright because, and again, I'm not an expert, but I do know some things. I am not somebody to be quoted, but I can at least point people in the right direction. Just point that for anybody joining. Um, music, when something is uh, out of copyright, for instance, Mussorgsky's Pictures in an Exhibition is one of my favorite classical pieces. The original score is out of copyright. It was written for piano. There was a score that was written like 20 years later for orchestra, which is not out of copyright because it's still in I mean, it was written past the 1923 or whatever. So orchestral versions based on that score are not are still paying royalties to that score, while you could sit down at a piano and play the original piano arrangement for free. But if somebody redid the piano arrangement and changed things around for four hands or two pianos or something, that would be another new work based on the original. I can sit here and whistle all of Pictures at an Exhibition online. I can actually whistle almost all of Pictures in an Exhibition, except for Noma's. It's a bitch. But the idea is that, you know, it's the song itself is okay, but a new arrangement could be based on an old arrangement and therefore be different. And also, any played version of it would be in copyright. Anytime if an orchestra sits down, pays their royalties, plays the orchestral version, recordings of that are then copyrighted to the orchestra from that date forward. So yeah, music is just really tricky when you're especially when you're looking at old stuff. That's why even though, say, a song like I'm trying to think of something like Bicycle Built for Two, which is is probably out of copyright. You know, a recording of it made in 1927 wouldn't be out of copyright. And you know, I mean, it all goes back to when that version was made is when the copyright begins. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate that there's so many variations on things. And but it's the more you know, the less chance that you can get dinged on down the line. And I hope that's at least a little bit of what I'm talking about here to get it to
but
help.
you can have help.
And it's it is I mean it's that's one reason, oh, thanks Sonny Bono. Oh, was he now? Is this is Sonny Bono the musician part or Sonny Bono the government part? It takes a little while to get the messages, so it'll be a little while before I hear an answer to that. Let's see, naming this. This is Hyde. But yeah, it's always best just to just cover your ass. Now there are a lot of places where you can get copyright free or permission available music to use to do, especially for things like audio drama, because you're not playing the entire track at any time. You're using it under voices, under effects, or just in short pieces. And so there's a lot more freedom for that, especially under Creative Commons. I used to get a lot of my Creative Commons music through Jamendo, but they've changed their interface. It's a lot harder to find stuff now. Or at least it was the last time I went there, and I know they've changed it again since then. So, there's still a number of places to get music that's permissible to use for Creative Commons, but if you can hook up with a composer who can get you what you want, that's often the best way to do, because there's a lot of people out on the internet who are doing things because they love it, who are composing music or whatever, and they, of course, like anybody, they would love to be discovered and get paid for their work. Everybody would love that, but at the same time, they're not averse.
No danger, no.
They're not averse to letting people use their stuff.
She's around during the summers.
Okay. So they're not averse to people using it in especially in small pieces, because it gets their name out a little bit. Now that's different. There's a whole difference in looking for Creative Commons music than in going up to somebody and saying, "Would you compose me something? It'll be great exposure." Well, yeah, I know he's the same guy. I meant the part of his career. What part of his career, of Sonny Bono's career, were we talking about? Yeah, well, no, the copyright laws have been around for a long time. He got some portion of this stuff passed, but they've been around since, basically since the Constitution. I looked into it at some point for patents, I think, but I saw copyrights as well. Again, not my area of complete expertise, but yeah, he didn't do all of this. A lot of it already existed, but also you have to understand also that nowadays with electronics and everything, things are more likely to get found out. In the 70s, the chances of somebody knowing that you were at a place singing or whatever would be tiny, and they wouldn't really pursue it, especially if you just stopped. While nowadays, everybody finds out everything instantly because somebody puts it on Instagram or on Facebook or something. But yeah, I'd have to look into what all he changed, but I know a lot of this. When was he a congressman? Anyway, I know a lot of this has been around. Oh, it's after 7. I should probably stop soon, but I'm going to continue for a little bit till I get all these files done. But copyright it's been crazy for longer than he was alive. So it's one of those places that people are constantly changing. They're changing the rules or whatever, and there's so many weird ass rules too. Things like, get this, a speech nowadays is different, but until it might have been the 1974 revision that he was working on, but I don't think he was in Congress in 74. I thought he was in Congress in the 80s and 90s. '74 was a huge change in the copyright laws. That's why the previous public domain dates froze at 1923 instead of moving forward, because in the 1970s they changed the law that extended some of the extensions, and also they changed the law about if you have to have a copyright notice on it for it to work. Oh yeah, well now, yes, England and Ireland are under a completely different legal system than we are. So yeah, that, and also, oh, I think they're under the Berne Convention. Don't quote me on it, but the Berne Convention is usually 50 years after the date of copyright, unless it's a work for hire or something like that. And so we're ours is 70 years after the death of the author or something. I it's one of those things that I look up periodically to make sure I'm not screwing with, but it's easiest for me to just focus on what it is in the U.S. than trying to understand worldwide copyright rules. But yeah, we are not under the same copyright rules as everyone else in the civilized world. I mean, I only say civilized world because it's got to do with the European nation and whoever agrees to the Berne Convention, which isn't everyone. And some countries specifically don't because they harbor bootleggers or whatever. I mean, they don't. The country doesn't specifically harbor bootleggers, but because they specifically don't accord to it, that's where the bootleggers go because they can't get in trouble there or whatever. It's like in the movie Diva from the 70s when the Taiwanese specifically didn't agree with the other. They're after the guy for the recording because they can. Too much to talk about. Diva was a great movie. Anyway, let's see. This is probably
Please
Ken.
don't let it be more trouble.
That's definitely Ken. Ken's mostly on the left, and I think Alice and Hyde alternated on the right mic because they don't actually talk at all in this episode. One thing with the episode I'm working on right now, save, yes, 25, is that most of the actual action takes place in a flashback sequence. This particular episode has, it's introduces, I mean, this is totally off the subject of copyright, Fatal Girl. It introduces back when Ken and Chiyoko first met, and Chiyoko's parents are fighting a monster. And so it gives a little bit of history for the characters. And in current day, everybody's kind of going off on their own tangents. They're not doing anything like that, but we're also reestablishing the world and the interactions between the characters because it's been such a long hiatus since the last episode, so that people coming back don't have to necessarily go listen to everything again to pick up where they left off and pick up what's going on. But it helps because all the last episodes are really good. I've been listening to them all week and I'm all excited. Yes, well, another question on, back to the questions here. It says, wouldn't it be a better world if we were allowed to sing 4-part harmony in public, though? Yes, but I mean, I have to defend the originator's right to their work because otherwise I have no right to my work. The fuck, Ken? Pardon my French. So this is what, Alice or Hyde?
Look at that creep.
Alice. I mean, it would be lovely if, but the problem is that, it's a slippery slope, as they always say, but really, if an originator doesn't have the right to make money off of what they've done and defend their right to do that, then, well, what's the point of making any art at all? Because, well, we all have to work our full-time jobs and to make our living because we can't make our living doing art. I mean, it's it's just a sad state of things. It really is, because there isn't a good answer. I can feel for both sides, but I have to defend the right of the originator to make their living off of their art. Because, I would love to make a living off of what I do someday. I mean, I make a lot of money. Well, not a lot of money, but I make some money off of audiobooks. It's mostly royalties, which is why I'm so pissy about bootleggers. But, um, pardon me. But, yeah, it would be great if we could all just use everything and it was free. But if you do that, then the artists who are depending on that income don't get it. I mean, I work with a lot of independent writers, and they love writing. It's great, but the only way they can make the time for it is if they make a living at it. Because, if we all had a universal income, that would be awesome, because then artists could just spend their time doing art. But, that's not going to happen. Um, it because was it Finland, I think, or somebody in that area put in a universal income as a test, sort of. Just everybody pays into taxes, and then taxes pays everybody a living. And it would be cool if that could happen, because then students could be students and not have to work their ass off just to survive. And people who want to sit in their mom's basement and troll can just do that, because who wants them in the workforce anyway? but but the idea is, and then if you wanted anything more than a basic living, you would go get a part-time
What are you
job.
doing?
And there's Ken. So, but the idea is, we can't have it both ways. We can't say, well, some things are protected and some things aren't, or whatever. I mean, it's just too big of an issue to not to have a black and white, line down the middle and make it super easy for everybody. So, I just generally, try to find keep opening new files instead of saving. I'm such a crazy person while I'm talking. But I mean, it's just, I have to look at both sides. And while it's super easy for everybody to go, oh, well, when it was Metallica, they made money. Well, yeah, but I work with authors who aren't Metallica, and I work with musicians who aren't Metallica and aren't making money and are gracious enough to let me use things they've already made, that they've already done for whatever their reasons are, because they just want to do art or whatever. I've even had people compose things specifically for me because they wanted to, but I would never go to somebody and go, oh, hey, could you do something for me? Because that would be great exposure. Because that is, in many ways, the biggest insult you can do to any artist, is to offer them to ask them to put out a great deal of effort for free. Honestly, it is, because it just means that you don't value what they do at all. And it's, if you look at the old joke, of course, is, the restaurant who sends a note to a band going, hey, would you like to come play here? We can't pay you, but it'd be great exposure for your band. And the band turns around and sends them a letter saying, hey, we're having a big dinner party. We'd like you to cater it. We can't pay you, but it'd be great exposure for your restaurant. I mean, people think because something like music doesn't have a physical component like food, that it isn't the same thing, but they're still doing the same amount of work to make it every time they perform, And besides, you're not just paying for the 2 hours that somebody sings or plays or does whatever they do. You're paying for all of their rehearsal time and their learning and their back history that, allowed them to, that they went to school or studied, or I did it again, or did whatever they've done to get to the point where they are competent enough that you want them to play for you, and or want them to draw for you or whatever. And, it's just the way it is. And if I can't respect others, I can't expect them to respect my work. I'm almost done. Okay. Oops, I didn't put a name on this one. Yes, I understand. The comment is, I'm on both sides too. I'm glad I don't have to pay a royalty to the guy who designed my chair every time I sit in it because I sit a lot. Yeah. Well, that's why it's intellectual property is so tricky, because so much of the time something like copyright protects something that is essentially intangible, whether it's music, whether it's words that have been written, whether it's a performance of some kind. It is not something you could put in a box and store away and then use again later. Obviously it's got, you could have it tangibly in form as a CD or a book or something, but yeah, see, yeah, you take your Audible when your audiobook sells, and I'm the same way. And like I said, that's why I'm so pissy about pirating. It's like, I have to. Must have been something funny. I have to, I have to be on the side
He's checking.
of the copyright owner, because sometimes that's me in some form or other. So this is Alice, and I think this is 32, because I forgot to name the track. How clever. But also, one weird part about copyright was until I think 1974-ish, when they changed all the laws, something that was done live and not recorded was not copyrighted. So speeches, for instance, were not copyrightable unless they were written down or recorded in some other fashion. A dance performance, the choreography was not copyrightable until it was performed and videotaped or something. It was just such a weird law. And like, this is one of my things I use as an example for why the copyright laws are weird, but I mean, that's even more intangible than the normal state of things, like a story you wrote. A story is essentially intangible. Even when it's in book format, it's still, the story part is in your head. It's what you read and what you hear in your head, as opposed to, something that is a piece of art that is here and is physical. So, yeah, it's tricky, and it's just better to be safe than sorry, which is why I do go off on rants about it sometimes, because it is an area that can catch people unawares, because there's a lot of bad information out on the internet about this kind of stuff too. So, well, I'm going to finish up these last few ones here, and that'll wrap me up for today, because I have run kind of long. I'm glad I had... Hold
It was really, it was sabotage.
on. What?
Not a sibling, your competition.
Ooh, that'll be creepy. Okay. That clip was probably completely inexplicable, but in season 2 of Fatal Girl, coming back to reality, quote unquote, there are flashbacks for Ken and Chiyoko's childhood. In a later episode, there's flashbacks to Alice's forgotten childhood. Not that she remembers it, but we get to see what happened. And then at some point, I'm going to have to do a flashback for Hyde's rather gloomy childhood. Oh, we've had fun with this. So is this Hyde or Alice?
As a child.
Okay, this is Hyde. I'm not gonna let you hear that part yet. He gives a great monologue. It's a great monologue. I do say so because I wrote it. But it opens, I'll tell you the opening line and leave everybody to hang. The opening line of Hyde's monologue, did it again, is I remember the first time my father touched me. And it's not dirty. So that's going to be interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to have a listener. I mean, I figured it would take a while for this to catch on if it ever did, and that I'm getting a lot of views on the YouTube channel because I've been putting these over on 19 Nocturne Boulevard's YouTube channel as well. So, there's been getting some hits there from people listening to them after the fact, but it's so cool to have somebody to interact with. That's a huge part of the fun of doing it live. So hopefully I'll get more of that in the future, and you're welcome back anytime. I'm sure I'll be talking. Oh, how often? I am trying to do this at least from 6 to 7 most days. It won't be every day because every once in a while my mom wants to be, have me come to dinner and prove I'm still alive. And I don't know why she gets. I get really hermity during the winter. It isn't. It is a fact. That's one reason I'm doing this is because Fatal Girl is. I mean, just reading through the scripts like a week ago, I was just getting so cheered up. I have the seasonal affective thing. It makes me want to just sleep the whole winter away. I just, blame the fact that, my Norwegian heritage probably included bears because those winters get cold. And so, yeah, I'm so pleased. And I figured, taking it, if I'm streaming it and putting it up, that it might also help other people as well as get me through some of this editing process. It'll probably be slow doing only an hour a day, but if I start getting more and more people showing up, I might actually take it longer on purpose as opposed to today when I just ran along because we were chatting and everything. And but yeah, 6 to 7 Pacific Standard Time is the time that I have set for most days. If I am not going to be up, I'll post something on the Twitch feed. I think I can put an announcement there that just says, not today. Yeah, definitely check it out again. And I'm happy to answer questions. I am not a technical person, as I've said a couple times, which means that if I can explain it, I can explain it in terms most people can understand. Instead of saying, well, the megahertz got to be the blah blah, I'll be like, this is bigger than this. That's not right. So at least I can try to help that way. Anyway, so yes, thank you for coming, and I think I should wrap up now. It's been run quite long, and yeah, it's been exciting having somebody to chat with. So I'm out. Have a great day.